Hey friends, welcome back to week 11 of Rotoworld's DFS building blocks. As always, I am John Daigle, joined by none other than Ian Hartitz. Ian, how's it going?
Great day to be great, John.
Great day to be great. And it is week 11, so hopefully it's a great weekend to be great. As always, though, as we get started here, we will be taking your questions on YouTube and Twitch as they come along, so continue asking them as the show progresses. But we like to start with the Thursday night game, not only because it's a way to wet our chops and discuss football, but because we will forget to talk about it at the end of the show. So let's get right into it. Ian, captain options and the overlook of this game as a whole. What are you thinking here?
James Conner, right? I mean, I don't think there's anyone in the Steelers offense right now. We can talk about the Browns in a minute, but particularly on the Steelers side of the ball, I just can't trust any of these guys when it comes to volume. I mean, since their week 7 bye, Juju and Jalen Samuels have 20 targets, and we got Vance McDonald at 18, James Washington at 17, Deontay Johnson at 15. I mean, they're not throwing the ball as much as they did last year, and even more complicating matters is the fact that they're not condensing their target share around 2 players like we saw last year. So, man, I've had Juju in a lot of season-long leagues. It's rough, but we just got to accept this new Steelers offense for what it is, and it's a group of 4 to 5 pass catchers that can each be involved in any given week. I think Connor's the only certainty in this group right now. Mason Rudolph, I know he's banged up, but before the injury, RB6, RB29, RB1, RB8. They've thrown him the ball. The guy's breaking tackles again. I think you got to fire up Connor in the captain spot.
What I like about Connor a lot, too, is that his ownership should be down because of concerns of his injury. But we've seen him come back from already 3 injuries now and play and step right into every down opportunity. Samuels will be involved a little bit, but it's still going to be Connor's show most likely on 20-plus touches and, more importantly, in the passing game as well. Because, as we know, Mason Rudolph averaging under 5 air yards per attempt this year. Like, Mason Rudolph doesn't throw downfield, and that helps James Conner out of the backfield.
Pop pass extraordinaire, Mr. Mason Rudolph. But there's some options on the other side of the ball that are interesting. So last week, Kareem Hunt, first game back with the Browns. I think we all kind of expected them just to take the Dontrell Hilliard role and get that 30 or 40% snap rate, but I wasn't expecting too many touches. That really wasn't the case. I mean, he ended up with 54% snap rate, 4 carries, 9 targets, but it was the usage of those targets that was so intriguing to me because 14 snaps in the slot or out wide. He never even hit double digits with Andy Reid in Kansas City. I mean, obviously they had a couple more good receiving options than I think the Browns do at this point. So, nothing against Andy Reid or anything, but clearly Freddie Kitchens and the Browns want to keep their best players in the field at all times, as they should, and that's Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt right now. So, Kareem Hunt, sneaky player that I wouldn't captain him per se. I still think he's looking at 10 to 12 touches more weeks than not, but man, that guy's explosive. He's going to get loose and make some big plays at some point.
I will say, if you don't want to go to James Conner, though, one, I am slightly concerned about the Browns' team total here, which I believe is, 21.5 points in a lower-scoring game? Something like that, unless the line has moved in the past few hours.
We got 22.25.
22, okay.
Very close.
But either way, another interesting piece would be Juju Smith-Schuster in the captain spot, and that's because he is going to stick as their slot receiver, and I'm not sure. You do the wide receiver cornerback chart.
TJ Carey.
Okay, that's what I thought. Denzel Ward, as we know, is our concern here, but Denzel Ward won't shadow him to the slot.
Right.
So Juju Smith-Schuster, yes, James Washington has been involved more unexpectedly the last 3 games. He's seen what I believe is 25 targets in that time, but he's only run a route on 51% of Mason Rudolph's dropbacks in that time. And even though Mason Rudolph has been delivering the ball to him efficiently, like we said, Mason Rudolph doesn't throw deep. And with Conner back now and with Samuels involved, it's a game where I think they will feature their running backs and then pretty much Juju Smith-Schuster shallow, but he does have the talent to break out and beat what is the weakest point of Cleveland's defense from the slot against TJ Carey.
Question is if the other wide receiver on their side of the ball can finally break out and
our boy Deontay?
Oh, Deontay, get out of here. I'm talking about Odell Beckham Jr., man. Last week, look, I thought he was really going to break out. I knew it was a tough matchup, but it seemed like a squeaky wheel spot without the benefit of a good matchup because obviously Tre'Davious White is so good. But the Browns did make the extra effort to get him involved after, we had that kind of whole week of media infuriation leading up to it. But yeah, OBJ last week, season high 168 air yards, season high 12 targets. I mean, first play of the game, he beat Trey White deep, got overthrown, drew 2 defensive pass interferences in the end zone. A blow-up is happening for Odell Beckham Jr. soon. I don't know if it's this week. Joe Hayden's been playing out of his mind in addition to Minkah Fitzpatrick. I don't think he's going to be shadowed by either of those guys, but it's a very good secondary in Pittsburgh right now. Jarvis Landry also double-digit targets in 3 straight games. So I don't know if it's this week, but if you're making multiple lineups and don't have OBJ in the captain spot, at least a couple of them, I think you're doing it wrong.
I agree, and it came, not so coincidentally, occurred after his blow-up and Baker Mayfield like making a proclamation saying no, like we have to force feed and get Beckham involved.
He did, yeah.
And that's what hit him. That's why Beckham then had a season high targets. I understand it didn't work out in production wise in the box score the way we wanted it to, but just the fact he was involved on season highs across the board, that's encouraging altogether.
100%.
Okay, so as we move along here for the Week 11 main slate, remember we are still taking your questions throughout the show on Twitch and YouTube, and we'll get to them as we move along position to position. But Ian, it's an interesting slate, so why don't you go ahead and start us off with your quarterback building block of the week.
Interesting slate. We'll start off with an interesting player, Jeff Driscoll. I was pleasantly surprised rewatching the Lions and Bears game last week. Jeff Driscoll does not suck, John.
He's frisky.
He is frisky. I think that's a good word for him. I said he was a more athletic and bigger Kyle Allen.
Unlike Brian
Twitter
Hoyer,
sphere.
which I gave too much credit, I did not give Jeff Driscoll enough credit.
Exactly. So he did a good enough. It was a tough matchup in Chicago last week. They didn't even know if he was going to start until Sunday night pretty much. But he ended up enabling Kenny Galladay and Marvin Jones good enough. Galladay went 3 catches, 57 yards in a score. Marvin Jones 5 catches, 77 yards. But the big thing for me that I like Driscoll, especially at this $4,600 price tag on DraftKings, he gives us a rushing floor. I mean, he ran for 37 yards last week. Once upon a time, Urban Meyer recruited him to Florida to run his offense before he had all that stuff go down. So clearly this guy is an athletic option. He can run the ball. We saw that a little bit in Cincinnati last season as well. He doesn't suck. He's frisky. Yeah, right. He's being priced on DraftKings as the worst quarterback on this slate. I think at 4,600, putting him in there, you can stack him with Galladay or Marvin. Against the Cowboys defense that has been good but not great this season. At home, yeah, give me some Jeff Driscoll.
I will say he just needs to be efficient because we expect the Cowboys offense to pretty much roll the Lions. Yeah. Dak is such a great play this week in tournaments because he's going to be overlooked on the opposite side of like Drew Brees and Jameis Winston, Lamar Jackson and Deshaun Watson. That's why Dak is a great play himself. And Jeff Driscoll then, if you want to run it back, sure, yeah, like it's not a bad option whatsoever because you can still fit Amari Cooper in with Jeff Driscoll. But no, mine is another.
Before you start, I want to say that I like your cash play better here.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is I think we could all agree, this is probably going to end up in quite a few cash games. He is going to end up in a few cash games because Kyle Allen is in an immense spot. And whether he's a good player or not, I don't care at all because the Falcons had 7 sacks heading into last week. And yes, they made the defensive coordinator change to Jeff Ulbrich, but they should not have came away with 6 sacks and a complete mismatch in the trenches. Kyle Allen, I would expect, bounces back against this defense that I think was a complete fluke performance. Once, like I said, we're bottom in sacks. They were bottom in interceptions. It's just a bad defense all around. So Kyle Allen should explode with DJ Moore, who's bound for positive regression, leading this team with a 27% target share over the past month, and even then has yet to score a touchdown in that time. So I would imagine that it's a bounce back for DJ Moore and your boy Curtis Samuel all together, and 5,300 on DraftKings in particular, cheap on FanDuel as well. It's a great spot for Kyle Allen.
Our top 2 values of the quarterback position on our DFS toolkit are Dak Prescott and Kyle Allen.
There you go.
There you go, Mr. Daigle. All right, I'm going with Josh Allen, though, as my GPP quarterback play of the week. He's priced up for this matchup against the Dolphins, 6,600. I know he hasn't quite given us the upside that we saw a little bit more last year. He's just kind of finding the end zone a little bit as a rusher. But you know what? I like having that floor here because we know he can go off if he hits a couple of those deep balls against this atrocious Dolphins defense. And again, man, I'm just a slave to these running quarterbacks and the floor they give. It really is ridiculous with Josh Allen, though. Like, Lamar Jackson only got more rushing yards than Josh Allen. People might have guessed that, but the only players with more rushing touchdowns since Josh Allen, since week 1 of last season, Todd Gurley, Derrick Henry, Aaron Jones, Christian McCaffrey, James Conner, Jordan Howard, Alvin Kamara. That's it. Like 14 rushing touchdowns from Josh Allen since week 1 last season.
Insane.
They get to the 1 yard line, they sneak him in. Like last week, he had a design quarterback draw we got in. Like they use him as a weapon inside the 10 yard line. It's such a fantasy friendly role. And look, it's again, smash spot against the Dolphins. I don't love the price point, but I think for that reason, you can go a little bit undervalued in tournaments.
If you see me looking under the stage, by the way, it's because something smells like it's heating up. That's why I keep pondering what's going on down here. But we're going to move on until we catch on fire, so it's just fine. We'll figure it out in half an hour.
The picks are too hot, man. That's all
that could be it, actually. My quarterback, however, I do wish Josh Allen could hit the deep ball better. That was concerned last year, but I feel like he's regressed further, like 5 of 30 on attempts, 20-plus yards downfield. That's the only issue.
Not great.
However, I would say it's confident that John Brown has kept a floor in that span. That's pretty good. And we'll probably talk about John Brown as we move along here. But my GPP play is none other than Drew Brees off of technically a letdown against the Falcons defense last week. you should have no concerns whatsoever against the Bucs defense with Drew Brees. Not only was he already in a great matchup because they have struggled to this point, they are walking in without Vernon Hargreaves, who was terrible and waived midweek. They won't have second cornerback MJ Stewart, who's out for 3 to 4 weeks now. And then third cornerback Carlton Davis was on the injury report and hasn't practiced yet this week as well. So he's starting against number 39 overall pick, the number 99 overall pick, and then a guy, Ryan Davis, who's played 2 defensive snaps all year long. It is a smash spot for Michael Thomas, who got priced up across sites for a reason, because even as a receiver, I do think Michael Thomas is, and we'll talk about him in a minute as well, I think he is the safest option on this slate, despite his higher salary. Yeah. And that, of course, then trickles back down to Drew Brees and as an amazing overlooked tournament play. Behind, as we said, Lamar Jackson and Deshaun Watson are going to carry heavy ownership.
I feel like the biggest issue with Brees sometimes is just pass volume. He'll throw 25 or 30 passes in some of these weeks, but Buccaneers, they sell out to stop the run, so they're going to make Drew Brees pass, and good luck with that.
And that's why his road woes that we are always concerned about make him a tournament play more so than a cash play.
For sure. Okay, so moving on to running back, my cash game running back of the week, might be a little scary for cash, but Miles Sanders at 4,100. 4,100. That is his cheapest since week 3.
Sell me on it.
Even though now we actually know what his role is. And I was a little worried when Darren Sproles came back in week 9 before their bye, because we have seen Peterson lean on old man Sproles as a pass catcher, even with other options available. But look, Sanders came through that, 10 carries, 3 targets, 38% snaps, pretty much played the same role we've seen him playing with Jordan Howard for last month. And guys, Sanders is killing it lately. Like, he is legit good. He's had at least 3 catches in 5 straight games. He's adding a new dimension to their passing game, which they need more than ever with Djax on the IR, Alshon Jeffrey banged up. And we're talking about these 2 tight ends, Ertz and Goddard this week, probably more on them in a bit as well. But I think Sanders is the guy we're all kind of missing here, and he's facing this Patriots defense that, look, you can pull up any stat about the Patriots defense, and they're going to be awesome against whatever position, whatever situation. With that said, go back to Corey Clement in the Super Bowl. Think about Kareem Hunt when he faced the Patriots on the Chiefs. Think about even Damian Williams in the playoffs last year. The Patriots have a little bit of a weakness against these receiving running backs that can truly get downfield and function as legit threats. I mean, we even heard Chris Collinsworth in the Sunday night broadcast last week, and they were playing the Ravens, talking about, when he can get some of those linebackers, other than Jamie Collins, who's a complete athletic freak, when he can get the other linebackers out in space and trying to cover, tough to do, but it's problematic. And if you've watched any Eagles game this year, I mean, Miles Sanders gets 2 to 3 targets on just wheels downfield alone a game. So he's got the pass game floor. Again, price point is so low. I know it's a bad matchup, but this is when we want Sanders. We want a situation where they could be trailing and they need to get him more involved in the passing game.
He's kind of become their third receiver anyways, right? As Alshon Jeffrey has struggled. Alshon Jeffrey has the floor, yes, but he has no ceiling because he struggled so much, and he continues dropping the ball as they've moved to more 12 personnel. That's why I do like the running game as a whole. I think even Jordan Howard's viable this week because, as we know, the Patriots have been smashed by Nick Chubb for 120 yards before they went to their bye, and then Mark Ingram for 115 yards. So if you attack the Patriots anywhere, it is obviously running against them, not through the secondary.
Patriots' biggest strength is their cornerbacks, and the Eagles don't even have any receivers to attack them, so it works out.
They have become slowly a power running team, which bodes well for Miles Sanders for sure. Mine is the hottest name on waiver wire pickups for season long, but also a cheap option in DFS, and it's Brian Hill. Maybe he's not a good player, who knows, but his college profile, just setting every school record in rushing yards and touchdowns at Wyoming, bodes well. Also, he didn't fumble on over 350 touches in college, also bodes well. Yes, he didn't cut it with the Packers practice squad whenever he was initially drafted with them, but even so, he projects to soak up Devontae Freeman's not only carries, but 5 targets per game against Carolina, who has the number 32 dead last rushing defense DVOA. It is a cinch matchup, and why I like him not only for 20-plus carries, even if the Falcons' defense is a farce and they do not perform as they did last week, it still is good for Brian Hill because he's going to be on the field nearly every snap. Kadri Allison was active last week. I couldn't believe it. I had to go back in the box score because Brian Hill still outsnapped Kenyon Barner 38-10, and that was with 3 backs active. So if Brian Hill got 22 touches on 38 snaps last week, just imagine what he does on 45 to 50 snaps, whether they're trailing or not. So it's just to me, it's just a player getting every touch for a cheap price, and that usually spells lock him in.
And Dan Quinn even said he's confident in Hill, taking on that lead role if and when Freeman doesn't suit up. So I like that. Brian Hill is our number 1 value of the week in our DFS toolkit. Moving on to GPP, I'm looking at a guy who he will find the end zone at some point again soon. That's Leonard Fournette here at 7,900. Look, this season, only Christian McCaffrey and Dalvin Cook are averaging more touches per game than Fournette. I mean, he has stayed healthy. He has gotten that workhorse role that we envision in a best-case scenario. The problem has just been finding the end zone. I mean, he has 214 touches this season, just 1 touchdown. The second-place guy in terms of most touches with 1 or fewer touchdowns, Adrian Peterson, all the way down at 123. So I really do think, Gardner Minshew played so well, especially just creating plays and stuff. But the one area where he and the offense has struggled is in the red zone. I mean, they have the league's 3rd worst red zone touchdown rate this season. Nick Foles could help in that category, could help elevate Fournette, find the end zone more often. And look at the spot. Colts 6 in DVOA against the pass, 23rd against the run. I think Fournette goes a little bit overlooked with how, Zeke facing that banged up Lions D-line, Dalvin Cook being Dalvin Cook, McCaffrey being McCaffrey. Fournette gets that same volume. He's in a better spot, and I think he can provide the same production.
We talked about Drew Brees a second there, but I want to quickly run back because Greg Zeus asked, are you thinking a New Orleans Tampa Bay stack this week? Is that one of your favorites? Me personally, it is one of my favorites. I think there's like 3 games this week you can stack. That's why it's such an interesting slate.
Especially with Marshawn Lattimore out. I mean, we've seen him, other than week 1 of last season, Marshawn Lattimore has won pretty much all of his shadow matchups against Mike Evans. Chris Godwin seems like he's due for a bounce back game. And the Saints target share, I mean, the one good takeaway we had from last week was Michael Thomas, Alvin Kamara, and Jared Cook all had double-digit targets or very close to it. No one else was even over 3. So we have 2 offenses where the target share is all condensed around pretty much 3 players. So definitely a game stack worthy.
And recall Mike Evans, that last game against New Orleans this year, like Marshawn Lattimore held him catchless.
Usag, yeah.
Yeah, so it definitely helps now that Marshawn Lattimore's out. And as always, keep your questions coming in. We'll get them on the show when we can. And follow along if you would like at rotoworld.com/DFS. Right now, you can use the code NFL50 to get 50% off both the toolkit and the rest of our season-long projections and whatnot. So feel free to go there, rotoworld.com/DFS, you would like to. But moving on here, my tournament play is Dalvin Cook. And one, it's because Christian McCaffrey is in such a good spot that Dalvin Cook is going to go completely overlooked despite still being a workhorse and the second best running back in fantasy right now. But not only from a price standpoint, not only going overlooked, Adam Thielen's trickle down and most likely being absent because it's Thursday when we record this and he has yet to practice, it has helped in order Dalvin Cook and Kyle Rudolph, and to a lesser extent, Irv Smith. Irv Smith is involved. Kyle Rudolph's getting sprinkled in the red zone now, which is why he scored 3 touchdowns without Adam Thielen. But Dalvin Cook still 6.5 targets over his last 3 games. So he not only continues getting 20-plus carries, but he's also being used in the passing game. He's literally Christian McCaffrey light. So if we think this is going to be a competitive game against Denver, or at least they're not leading by 3+ scores to get Alexander Madison in full time, Dalvin Cook's in such a great spot at what is likely going to be low ownership.
I love it. Okay, moving on to wide receiver, my cash game play, Mr. Mohamed Sanu. And we answered some questions about him back in week 9 where we were wondering what his role was going to be and how quickly he'd get integrated in this offense. And I think both of our takeaways was, okay, wait till after their week 10 bye and he should be in full go.
Yep.
They actually got to him a week before that because, that week 9 game against the Ravens, each of Edelman, Dorsett, and Sanu were on the field for 99 to 100% of the snaps. That is their 3-wide formation. And in these 2 games with Sanu, we've had Edelman get 22 targets, Sanu's got 19. The next closest guy is Dorsett at 10. Again, they traded a second-round pick for this guy, and they're feeding him the ball. It makes sense. They like him and nothing but good things. But here's the interesting part because N'Keal Harry is coming back, first-round pick. Now, how is he going to impact this offense? I think we see the Patriots go more 4 wide receivers because Ben Watson is already playing like a wide receiver. He played as a slot receiver on 70% of his snaps in that Baltimore game. We know Sanu, dating back to his time with the Falcons, even Cincinnati, he's more comfortable in the slot. He's better in the slot. Edelman and Sanu as the slot receivers, N'Keal and Dorsett on the outside. It gives them their 4 best pass game options until Gronk, if Gronk comes back. Then we'll worry about that. But right now, I think having those 4 guys out in the field at the same time gives them the best chance at success. It's impossible to figure out what the Patriots are going to do, so maybe I'm wrong. Either way, we do have evidence already of Sanu getting the targets, getting the snaps. He's only 5,100 against an Eagles defense that I have come out here and said I think they're going to be better moving forward now that they finally got their healthy group of cornerbacks. But I mean better as like they're not the by far worst secondary in the league. Like they might just be below average. Like this is still not a secondary to fear. Eagles have been a defense teams can't run the ball against. I think we're going to see Brady have to throw. When he throws, it's been underneath over the middle. That's where Sanu and Edelman are.
Well, it helps them because the Patriots rank top 6 in neutral pass rate. So they are a passing team, and it's likely because they've lost 2 fullbacks along the way this season. And I like Philip Dorsett as well, though. Sanu's probably the safer option. But in that 100% of the snaps, 14 targets Sanu game before the Patriots hit their bye, Dorsett played only 1 fewer snap and ran 1 fewer route. So Dorsett's like the sneaky, deep tournament option if you want to go that route. But either way, Tom Brady, number 3 in the league in pass attempts because it is a passing team. So, yeah, I like them a lot. My cash play at wide receiver would be none other than Deebo Samuel because as George Kittle leaves and as Emmanuel Sanders perhaps may be ruled out here, Deebo Samuel, as we saw, for cheap as well, you're seeing the salary on your screen right now. Deebo Samuel played 70 of 82 snaps on Monday night, led the Niners in receiving as really their only confident option with 8 catches for 112 yards. Since Emmanuel Sanders joined the team, him and Kittle have accounted for 32% target share. So without that, those vacant targets confidently go to Deebo Samuel, and to a lesser extent, if you want to get like Kendrick Bourne and Ross Dwelly, but you can't trust those guys. We saw Kendrick Bourne put up one of the worst receiver performances of the year on Monday night. So Deebo Samuel, just for the salary and because of his opportunity, I think he's going to be a very high-priced option, which makes him a good pivot in tournaments, honestly. You can go somewhere else around that 4K range because everyone else is going to have their blinders on because they're only seeing Deebo Samuel. But for cash, you don't need to worry about it.
Number 1 receiver value is Deebo Samuel this week. Like you're saying, we've talked about this 49ers group all year, even before Emmanuel Sanders got there. Like, who could be the guy that kind of emerge? And it's always been Deebo because Shanahan's been feeding him rush attempts all year. Again, like, I mentioned they traded a second-round pick for Sanu. Deebo's a second-round pick. Like, I know the best players are going to play, but the players that the most capital is invested in are going to get every chance to prove they are the best players. So I think that's what we have there in Deebo. And I do think he's...
And Deebo profiles is...
I think he's very good.
Yeah,
yes,
Deebo profiles great anyways.
All right, my GP wide receiver. Oh, I forgot to say this. Happy Julio Jones week. Because that's what we're about to see. It is Julio Jones eruption week. 7,500 on DraftKings. That is the 5th time in the last 5 years that we've had a chance to play Julio Jones at 7,500 or cheaper. And he's facing a Panthers defense that, if you're old enough to remember, he once put up 300 yards on. I know this is a road game, but was surprised to see Julio Jones actually averages more receiving yards per game on the road than at home over his career. I mean, if you think back, they have been the Packers games, the Eagles games where he has blown up outdoors. I mean, he's good enough to beat you on grass or on turf. Doesn't really matter. But big thing here is the Panthers have a very good secondary when they're healthy. They are not even close to healthy right now. James Bradbury did not play last week. He's been limited this week, still dealing with a groin injury, clearly not 100%. Ross Cockrell with a quad and Dante Jackson with a hip haven't even practiced this week. So we have Julio Jones. No more Austin Hooper to soup up the target share.
18% target share vacant.
Exactly. So now if the Falcons get behind by multiple scores in the first half like they have all season, Matt Ryan's not even going to have the choice to dump it down to his tight end all game. He's got to keep going back to Julio. This needs to be the eruption week for Julio. I don't know when it'd be otherwise. 6 straight scoreless games. He's due. The matchup's right. I love Julio this week and Calvin Ridley.
I was about to say Calvin Ridley's 5,500 on FanDuel. It's too cheap. I like him a lot on FanDuel as well. But that is not my tournament play. My tournament play, really, I felt bad because I stole him from you because I knew you were going to want to talk about him. But really, it is Terry McLaurin.
Yeah.
And yeah, I wish Case Keenum, honestly, was under center because Terry McLaurin has been so good with Case Keenum and really has not had an opportunity to blow up against anyone else with any other quarterback under center. However, you just look at the Jets' corners right now and what they've done in their last 3 games, which is absolutely nothing. Gardner Minshew, who was benched, threw for 3 touchdowns. Ryan Fitzpatrick came in with a bad Dolphins offense and threw for 3 scores. And then, as we know, Daniel Jones last week just flourished with 300 yards and 4 touchdowns. This Jets secondary is arguably worse than the Bucs, and if they're not, they're 1A and 1B. And now they get maybe Dwayne Haskins will struggle, but they're going to get him, and now they get Terry McLaurin, who is far more talented than any of them can even offer in coverage against him. So no one's going to look at Terry McLaurin, and he has a real shot to finish as a top 20 receiver this week.
Jets corners are a combination of bad and injured right now, and let's just take a step back and give Haskins. I want to see 4 quarters of Haskins not on the road against the Bills or Vikings before I'm willing to call him bad. So
I will say, if we're playing probabilities, like probability is Haskins, and I don't think Haskins to McLaurin is a bad stack whatsoever. I kind of like it, actually. But I will say, you're not obviously going like 100%, or you're not going.
No.
I wouldn't anyways. I wouldn't go single entry Dwayne Haskins, just because probabilities are you're burning your money if you play Haskins.
Yeah, I'm not even talking about playing Haskins. I'm saying I trust Haskins to enable one fancy role.
I don't think it's a bad deal, though, honestly, to play him and Terry McLaurin, especially because Kyle Allen is going to carry ownership in tournaments as well, because it's such a good matchup. No one's going to think to look like a few salaries lower at Haskins just hiding underneath that 5K mark. So it's not a bad. You just have to understand probabilities that it's not in your favor to play him, but that also is how you win tournaments. So
I mean, I've just been comparing to like the James Washington situation in Pittsburgh, where we gave this guy like a month to mesh with Mason Rudolph based on them being college teammates and stuff. But, like, look, that's a crowded, unproven Pittsburgh offense. This is still an unproven Washington offense, but at the very least, we know McLaurin is their undisputed #1 receiver, and we've known that all season.
And we have Greg Zeus and Sauce716 here asking a wide receiver question, because without A.J. Green, who is out this week, and we wouldn't expect him, honestly, I don't expect him to play at all this year, and I think it's pretty clear because he doesn't earn or lose an extra dime, whether he plays with Ryan Finley or not. Where do you think the trickle down occurs among the Bengals offense? Because we may not get Alex Erickson in this game either. So it's a combination of Tyler Boyd and Auden Tate most likely.
Yeah, it's Tyler Boyd if you want to do that. LaMarcus
8 targets from Ryan Finley last week, too.
Yeah, because Ryan Finley loves to check it down. I mean,
boy, does he.
Only 2 of his 30 pass attempts went past 20 yards, and in the preseason, too, we could see that coming. He was bottom.
5.7 yards per attempt, something like that. Yeah.
It was bad. So, yeah, I do think Tyler Boyd a little bit, but, man, it's just like, do you even want to have anyone involved in that Bengals offense? So that's the only question. But, yeah, between who they have right now, definitely Tyler Boyd. I will note, too, Tyler Eifert has been popping up the last 2 weeks. He had a good game before, and so his snap rate, they played him 70% snaps before the trade deadline.
It was the showcase game.
The showcase. No, but then he came back last week, and he got like a short touchdown, but he only played 30% snaps. So, like, do not go chasing the Tyler Eifert production.
That's because I saw Tyler Eifert in a few waiver wire columns, and I was like, oh, I guess we may be chasing him as a cheap option in DFS. But then I looked, and like you said, 31% of their snaps.
He got the lucky touchdown.
He got the showcase game, and that's it. That he was put on the field sparingly. So no, you're not using it. Even though I will say Tyler Boyd and Auden Tate, not bad options, because the Raiders' offense is poised to explode this week. Josh Jacobs in particular, but the Raiders' offense as a whole. However, let's go ahead and move on here to tight ends, because we have Matthew Gardner asking, and Matthew Gardner and barely underscore mental, asking, what about cheap options here? Can we look to perhaps, do you have a tight end who's cheap, by the way?
Oh, yeah, I got 2.
You're about to help him out then. Go ahead.
Okay, so in cash, I like Dallas Goedert, and a lot of the same reasons.
I love Dallas Goedert.
Yeah, man, a lot of the same reasons why we were talking about Miles Sanders earlier. Look, this is just a condensed Philadelphia passing game at this point. I mean, Alshon, if he plays, he's got this ankle injury. He's just going to be wiped off the field by Stephon Gilmore anyway.
And he's missed practice now 2 days in a row.
Yeah. Matt Collins, I don't think he has a catch since week 4. Like, it's just ridiculous he's even on the field this often. Nelson Aguilar has like 100 combined yards since that Philly fan just called him out on the local news.
You look at the meme, I just look at the 2 luck box touchdowns he had, and then remember at that Packers game, he came back out without Alshon Jeffrey as well and did absolutely nothing as what we expected from him.
None of the receivers are doing anything, and because of that, they've finally given Goddard this full-time role. I mean, Goddard got banged up early in the season with that calf injury, but since week 4, he's played 70% of the offensive snaps. He's averaged 4.7 targets per game. I mean, he's been the PPR tight end 13 from weeks 4 to freaking now. So. Found the end zone 3 times. Yes, again, like we were saying, it's a bad matchup for everyone against the Pages. Understand that. But 3,200, he's being priced as the DraftKings tight end 19. We just need a very good tight end to hopefully find the end zone once. But if he just gives us his 4 for 50 line, hey, that'll work.
And in week 9, before the Eagles hit their bye, Dallas Goedert did quietly hit season highs in snaps, routes run, and slot snaps. So he has a chance to truly become their second wide receiver behind Zach Ertz in this game as the Eagles continue moving towards 12 personnel and attempt to become a power running team because they don't have strong outside perimeter receivers.
Play to your strengths.
Mine, though, as we had a question about Jack Doyle is actually Eric Ebron, because last week Eric Ebron, for the first time all year, outsnapped Doyle 43-42, and he had a season high 12 targets and a team high 12 targets as well. Yes, Brian Hoyer won't be under center, so maybe Eric Ebron doesn't captain so much. But the fact is, Eric Ebron wasn't typically getting the work and snaps over Jack Doyle previously, and now suddenly he is. So I think he can build on those 5 catches if he's still being used as their primary receiving tight end, and it's not just Jack Doyle under center running underneath routes for Jacoby Brissett. So 3,600 on DraftKings in particular, 3,900 I believe on FanDuel. Well, maybe he's more expensive on FanDuel as you pull it up over there. But either way, I like Eric Ebron a lot in cash games because he's a cheap option who genuinely can lead his position and this slate in targets from his position.
We keep talking about just condensed offenses. They don't have anyone else to throw the ball to right now other than really Zach Pascal. I mean, they tried out Marcus Johnson, who I barely even knew who that was. Yeah, exactly. So whenever Ebron's out there, I mean, yeah, play him. Irv Smith, 3,100 is my GPP tight end. I think he's like the arbitrage Dallas Goedert this week because he's another one of these just young tight ends that is really athletic. He's more of a true pass catcher than a blocker. He's just stuck behind a starter who, you know, I've given Kyle Rudolph a lot of flack this year, but man, that dude, that one-handed catch he had last week was so awesome.
It was nice,
so
yeah.
I don't want to say any mean things about Kyle Rudolph here because he is playing well, but Irv Smith's been playing really well too, and he's getting the ball a lot. He's got at least 6 targets in 3 of the last 4 games, at least 3 catches in all those games. There's a nice floor here, and he's going really under the radar still. 3,100. Again, I like to pivot off Goddard. I see a lot of projected ownership for Ryan Griffin, which, yeah, he's got the full-time role with the Jets, and I realize Herndon's gone. He's out of the picture, but like he's been out of the picture. Last week he was able to get a few snaps. Griffin is the most touchdown-dependent tight end you could ever come up with, and if he's carrying anything resembling high ownership, I want nothing to do with him.
I mean, Griffin is just Kyle Rudolph that hasn't hit yet, right? Because Kyle Rudolph is also, even with Adam Thielen, his snaps have actually gone down in favor of Irv Smith. He just has spiked 3 touchdowns, so that's why everyone's now running to him. But as we know, like, you don't want to chase 3 touchdowns on 3 end zone targets in that span. That's nothing that causes for positive regression.
And the Vikings have Stephon Diggs and Olabisi Johnson out there all the time. Trouble is the number 3 receiver, but he's playing like 20% snaps. Like, they are legit using 2 tight end formations like the Eagles as their base offense right now.
My tournament tight end, who also is cheap, and I think he'll go forgotten about, is Noah Fant. Because now we have 2 games under our belt that Emmanuel Sanders hasn't played. And Noah Fant, in that time, 84% of Denver's offensive snaps, has had a 25% target share in that time, 19% air yard share. And in those 2 games, yes, the 75-yard truck touchdown helped, but he still is ranked as fantasy's tight end 6 in the 2 games without Emmanuel Sanders on the team. So he's going to get a workload against a Vikings defense that has been exploited by opposing tight ends. So if you play Dalvin Cook, I don't think running it back with Noah Fant on the opposite side is the worst case scenario, especially because Brandon Allen targeted Denver's running backs, Phillip Lindsay and Royce Freeman, at their season low rate under center. So I do wonder, rest of season, if what was initially running back targets with Joe Flacco now suddenly become a few extra sprinkling for Cortland Sutton and Noah Fant moving forward.
I know you're just trying to paint a picture with what his production's been like, but I hate when we take away these players' big plays. Like, oh, if you remove this running back 60-yard run, he's only averaging X amount yards per carry. Like, Noah Fant is a freakishly athletic first-round tight end. Like, he was picked to make those types of plays.
He hasn't done himself favors this year for sure.
No, he hasn't.
But that almost like made up for all the mistakes he made, the 75-yard touchdown. And as I had told people, because I had been asked this on Twitter a lot, like, well, yeah, but it came on 1 score. And I was like, honestly, that's why I mentioned his usage and why I just told you his usage, because I don't care about the touchdown. Yeah. It's the fact that he was out there on season high rates, which is what then hopefully leads to touchdowns. So it wasn't a fluke. He was out there every single snap.
Yep. I would say monitor Jeff Hireman. Got the knee injury. He has been out. That's their other tight end. Just one of these situations, kind of like TJ Hawkinson in Detroit, where, you know, he's their number 1 tight end, but if Jesse James was out, it'd make things a lot easier. So if we want that every down snap rate, look for Hireman to be out.
Before we jump into defense, Bone 1281 actually does ask about defenses this week. So he mentions the Cowboys or Raiders, and I do think the Cowboys are a really good play, even though you have to pay for them. However, is there someone you are thinking outside of the Cowboys or Raiders?
Got a couple defenses I like. First of all, Patriots, 3,500, cheapest they've been since week 1. I mean,
Fair.
We've talked about the Eagles' injuries. That can mean good things for the other players, or it can mean all hell breaks loose with the offense. So, Patriots have been a cheat code on defense when they're not playing the Ravens, so something to keep in mind. I think the Vikings at home at 3,400. Like, I'm not sold on Brandon Allen. He had a nice first game against the Browns, but I don't know, man. Like, again, this is a new quarterback facing a Mike Zimmer defense.
20 passes, right? So we don't know anything about him either.
Let's see what Brandon Allen looks like if he's behind 14 in the first quarter. And then finally, feels a little icky, but the Jets at 3,100 are kind of intriguing me. Here's the amount of points Washington has scored since week 3. 15, 3, 7, 17, 0, 9, and 9. All they want to do is run the ball, and that's like the one thing the Jets can consistently stop. They're number 2 in rush DVOA. I think they're in the low 20s in pass DVOA. Jamal Adams, we know they got some ballers out there a little bit, maybe not the cornerback position. So, I could see a situation where Terry McLaurin goes off, gets inside 50 yards, 1 touchdown. The Redskins do absolutely nothing.
Well, just last week, the Jets defense was number 7 on the week, but they allowed 300 yards and 4 touchdowns because their defensive line is still the strength. And so they not only get to the quarterback and sack him, but that also sometimes leads to fumbles and turnovers.
I think they have 3 games with at least 15 DraftKings points this year. So
so they can get scorched by
potential.
McLaurin, and it may not matter. They can still finish as a top 8 cheap play across sites.
For sure.
But with that being said, as he asked, I actually do like the Raiders defense for cheap as well against Ryan Finley. You should like every defense against Ryan Finley since he's just Andy Dalton 2.0. And now, with that hot take, let's move into building our lineup on the week. Once again, rotoworld.com/DFS. We're using the toolkit, which includes the points per dollar tool that we have here, and also some projections as we move along to help us build a lineup. So I will let you start because there are a lot of options this week. It truly is like a 6-game slate where I want so many pieces.
And the only one that you need to make sure you have in every single one of your lineups is Julio freaking Jones.
Okay. It's a fair start, yeah. I'm gonna spend up as well, and I'm gonna go Dalvin Cook at running back.
All right, we gotta try to give the viewers.
I like those targets. I like those carries.
We have to go cheap now because I know we didn't give the viewers much extra room last week. Okay.
Even though like Rhett Ellison was a good play at cheap anyway.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, let me get off of this real quick. So the one thing at tight end this week is I don't like any of the super high-priced options with it. I really do think going down in price is the way to go.
Well, it's because this slate took not only George Kittle from us because it's a Sunday-only slate, but it also Travis Kelce's playing in Mexico City on Monday night, so we don't have him either.
No, that's fair.
So that's why there's really not many strong options. I think Zach Ertz is probably the one you want to pay up for if you pay up. However, if you go cheap, you can find an option.
I like your Eric Ebron call. I think we're going to go a little bit cheaper there. 3,600, like why?
Super cheap.
Why is Jack Doyle priced above him? It doesn't make any sense.
Even I'll admit, though, Jack Doyle's floor is higher, but I don't care about floor in tournaments.
I mean, they get pretty much the same usage. Or they don't get the same usage. They get the same target share because Doyle's on the field a lot more and just kind of gets it. But Ebron's the guy they actually look to throw the ball to. Oh, also real quick on him, Funches said today like he needs to let his bone heal more.
So he may not play at all?
Yeah, it doesn't sound good.
I assumed he was going to be limited even if he's healthy.
For sure, but it does not sound like
doesn't sound like he's going to be back. Okay. Yeah. Just like AJ Green, he's never going to play again all year long.
Okay, we got Dalvin Cook, Julio Jones, and Eric Ebron as our top 3.
Stuff Brian Hill in there. I think Brian Hill is the guy that you don't mind paying up for tournaments despite the ownership because you can always go contrarian elsewhere.
Yeah, if you're going to eat the chalk at running back, do it with a cheap 3-down guy.
You do it with a cheap every down touch guy. Yeah, we learned it with Jalen Samuels when he was 4K. Like, you don't fade those guys. You stuff them in because there are so many options elsewhere.
All right, at wide receiver now. We didn't talk about him too much, but I do think this could be John Brown's week. I mean, his floor has been insane this year. We still think him as a boom-bust guy. Him and Michael Thomas, only guys with at least 50 receiving yards in every game. I've been saying it for the last 4 weeks because it keeps holding true. I mean, one of these points, he's going to break out. But the good thing is, if he doesn't, your lineup's not going to sink because he's actually got a decent floor.
All right, you might as well throw Matt Ryan into make this a double.
Okay.
And then we'll leave the listeners with oh, no, we have one more spot, right? Okay, yeah. You might need to put a Panther in this lineup.
Adding Matty Ice. Okay.
You need to put a...
Yeah, I get my boy in there. So I will say, I've been supporting Curtis Samuel over DJ Moore this season just because I think Curtis is one of 5 or 6 guys with over 1,000 air yards, like literally one of the most fantasy-friendly receivers in football just on a per-target basis. But was it 3 straight weeks? DJ Moore's got over 10 targets. Like, they are feeding him lately. It was
27% target share the past month, and has performed under expectations because he hasn't scored a touchdown in that span.
I got thrown off a little bit by the first 2 games where Kyle Allen only gave DJ Moore, I think, 7 total targets. But since then, like, he has been their most targeted receiver. Yep. It's still a little bit of a conversation with him and Curtis, just because, again, Curtis's targets are more downfield. He gets more of the red zone looks a little bit too. But DJ Moore is a very viable option in this spot for sure.
I've been watching him and Calvin Ridley one by one since they did come out of the draft at the same time, and it was always tape versus metrics, and DJ Moore pops, whereas Calvin Ridley behind the scenes, outside of route running, like, is not athletic whatsoever. And outside of the touchdowns, though, they are so close. Just because Calvin Ridley blew up for 4 touchdowns against the Saints last year because he prospered in those matchups.
I think they're both awesome players.
They're both awesome players, and they're both awesome DFS plays this week.
Okay, so here's our final lineup for y'all. Matt Ryan, QB. 2 running backs are Brian Hill and Dalvin Cook. Julio Jones, John Brown, and Curtis Samuel at wide receiver, and Eric Ebron at tight end. That gives you $7,300 to go get you a flex in defense.
Awesome. And with that, I'm always bad at goodbye, so I'm just going to say it. We'll see you next week. Thank you for tuning in.